Welcome to our Posh podcast. I am your host, Gabrielle, and I'm here with my co-host, my daughter, Marcella.
Hello.
Our Puerto Rican amazing co-host, Bernie.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Spider, our DJ.
Hey, what up, y'all?
I don't know if that one worked well.
that was
I'm
awesome.
expecting like a... What
He
was the
likes
one?
Pony.
Pony is always good.
But this is great.
You like that?
Yes,
Is
that was
Beyonce?
awesome.
Is that what?
Yeah,
I love
Beyonce.
it.
You gotta
I like
change it
that
up
one.
sometimes.
That's because you're in crazy in love.
I am.
You're the one
I
who
am.
gets crazy.
I have a date right after this.
Oh!
Really?
Oh, yeah, for real.
Where'd you meet this date?
Ooh.
Yeah, and I gave you whiskey, and you're going to show up, and she's like, what the fuck, this guy
Well, I'm
drinks during the day?
planning on getting her drunk. And, well, we went out Sunday, and she said it was weird that I wasn't drinking. So
Where'd you meet her at?
The old building.
It's still her.
Yeah, same one.
Yes, that's exciting.
It's her birthday today.
Oh, I love it.
And it's
yeah.
mine on Thursday, so we're celebrating tonight.
Happy early birthdays. Well, I'll see you on Thursday.
Yeah,
Never
y'all
mind.
do.
You don't get it yet.
If I don't get to see you. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is an exciting beginning of the show. And we have to welcome our special guest today. Thank you for coming out, Randy Sullivan.
Yes?
Randy is a realtor
Mm-hmm. That's
that
right.
also has an amazing podcast that we have been guests on. And his podcast is called
Bourbon Real Talk.
Bourbon Real
so
Talk.
awesome.
So
I'm super
he
excited.
actually brought bourbon.
And it's on his shirt.
It's on his shirt.
It
He
is.
makes
And
his
YouTube
own
friends.
This is
merch.
very tasty.
This is really good. This is really
Now, I want you to know my whole life, besides Fireball, I've never had whiskey before. When
What do
he
you
came
think?
and interviewed us, he had a whiskey that actually was kind of good. I could actually sip it. I was so shocked.
good. What did you
Well, he brought
bring the
whiskey
last time?
again.
It was the Angel's Envy Rye.
Ooh,
I like
that's
that
a good
one.
It's the whiskey that if a woman says I don't like whiskey and I give her that and she says she doesn't like it, I'm like, I can't help you.
That's probably why I like. That's the one I like the most.
Yeah.
So funny. So what do you think here?
It's
tried
a
it yet?
little rough.
A little rough?
Yeah.
All right.
But that's okay.
It likes burn.
Marcella clearly didn't like hers either.
No, this is
Clearly.
all I got because I
I-
had to go to work.
Yeah, I didn't give her much because she said she had to go to work. I don't know what that means. But,
I'm working with small children.
You need more bourbon than...
Yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding.
well,
For sure.
there's enough to get us all where we need to be. So if you run out, let me know.
Well,
Fair
we are
enough.
so glad you're here because when we came on your show, when you came to do your show with us,
Mhm.
throughout our conversation, and first and foremost, you are the first one that got us to talk mafia, which
Yeah.
everyone wants to hear.
I've been dying to hear this whole thing, and I still
And-
haven't even got her to
Tell me
talk
about it.
mafia. You neither?
He got us to talk about it, and he actually has inspired us to really do the whole thing.
Dive
so
into it.
Episodes 200 and
Is the goal.
on.
That's not
No,
too
this
far
is
away.
it. No, not too far
No,
away.
that's not word.
Is
No.
going to be where we're going to do it. And we always have to thank Randy for getting that started because I think we were kind of a little bit like, I don't know if we're going to ever do it. but we
Literally
are.
at the beginning, she was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure," and I'm like, "Just look, no one listens to my show. It's fine. It's fine. Say whatever you want. No one's gonna hear. Just use my show as practice. At some point, you're gonna have to do it on your show,
Yeah.
And here we are now.
and here we are.
And I don't believe no one listens to your
Yeah.
show. You have a great show. You have 20 episodes or something.
I
so
know,
that's
but
amazing.
that's a little trick that you use to get your guests to talk. Like, no one's gonna hear this. Don't worry.
Till it goes live.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
But I just wanted to hear a little bit, tell us a little bit about like, you're married, you have 2 kids,
Yeah.
you're a realtor. Tell us a little bit about that. And then I want to ask you some specific questions about your life because it is pretty mind-boggling.
Sure. Yeah. So I've never told my story. I started drinking early today because I was a little bit nervous. I mean, a lot of people know a little bit about my story, but my life took a really odd turn when I was 6. My dad was a methamphetamines manufacturer, a big
Wow.
one, basically Heisenberg story.
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah. So my wife came to me
like
a few
Legit.
years ago and was like, "Oh, there's this awesome show." And at the time, my dad was still in prison, right? And she said, "I want you to watch the show with me, but I'm not sure, it may upset you." And I said, "Well, what's it about?" And she said, "Well, it's this guy, and he's a high school chemistry teacher, and he uses his chemistry knowledge to start making meth because he thinks he's dying of cancer." And I said, "Hey, babe, I know I never told you this, but my dad was taught to make methamphetamines by a high school chemistry teacher whose husband was dying of cancer."
Are you serious?
like literal.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not watching that fucking show.
Holy-
It's
I
just
got the
too-
backstage
too close.
passes to this
Right.
show.
And then she was like, "Well, maybe they owe you royalties or some shit." And I was like, "I don't know what's going on, but I'm
Wow.
not watching it." So, you know, he went to prison, and my mom ended up marrying my uncle, no blood relation, but he had been married to my dad's sister. So while my dad was in prison, they got married, making my cousin my stepsister.
My God.
Yeah,
Wow.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Back up.
Yeah, you got to
What?
take me through this right
So
here.
your
Wait.
mom, no.
my mom married
But wait,
her
your mom
sister-in-law.
and your dad
uh-huh,
are
got
together, and
got
you
divorced.
but you and your brother,
Mm-hmm. Because I had a little
biological
brother. Yeah.
your little brother.
Mm-hmm.
Them. When are they getting to? How long are they married?
Let's see. They got married in probably 78. So they were married for, technically they were married for about 10 years, but they were I think that's about right. But my dad had been in prison for about the last 3 years of their marriage. So they were
you
married for
were
about 7
6
years.
when your dad went to prison the first time.
I was, when they raided the house, I was 6.
Were you in the house?
I was, yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I remember
you-
every fucking detail.
Okay,
You
before
did?
you
Where
go
were
any
you?
further, can you talk
Yeah.
about that? Because this is Breaking Bad live, guys.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
So I was sitting. We had a L-shaped couch. I was sitting at the very end.
What time of the day is
I was
it?
about to ask.
This
that.
was at night, pre-bedtime. So probably
Oh my God.
7,
Seven.
8 o'clock at night.
How old is your little brother at this point?
He was about to turn 1. My
He's a
mother,
baby.
baby.
And
my
you're
mother-
6.
and I remember every detail. My mother was on the phone talking with my aunt, I believe Jimmy Lynn, about my brother's first birthday party.
Real quick, did your mom have any clue about what your father was doing at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the meth lab was in the garage.
Okay.
Which, if you know anything about
What?
meth labs, that's fucking insane because they blow up all
They blow
the
up
time.
all the
Yeah. And so, side note, Speed, which is meth,
Yeah.
smells just like Speed Stick
Really?
deodorant.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so, as a kid, when I started wearing
That has to
deodorant
be
and
a weird-
I got Speed Stick, I smelled. I was like, well, I see why they call it Speed Stick. Reminds me of my dad.
Oh my God.
Weird.
Yeah. So I grew up in, there was a meth lab, and I was sitting at the end of the couch, and there were 2 assault rifles leaning up against the edge of the couch.
So this is just normal life. Assault
Normal
rifles
life.
all over the
There was I don't think my dad did much with cocaine, but there was those jars that you'd put flour in that have like the lid that latches.
Mason jar.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, but it's got like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
orange rubber.
Yeah.
And you latch it. There was one of those with cocaine in it.
What?
And
Just like out and about?
out and about, yeah.
I love your story so much already.
And
This is awesome.
and I'm watching TV, but my mom had given me bubble wrap to pop. And back then, it doesn't exist anymore, but they had TVs that created their own static electricity. and I used it to stick the bubble wrap to the screen.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so I'm watching, and it distorts the whole picture.
Uh-huh.
And I have a pickle in my hand. I've bitten the end off, and I dug all of the seeds out of it and was eating the seeds. And then the pickle was stuck on my thumb when they kicked the door in.
Wow.
So I have a pickle stuck on my thumb. My mom's on the phone planning my brother's 1-year birthday party. There's bubble wrap stuck to the TV.
Where's Dad at?
It's to the left. No.
Where's Dad at? Where's your dad at?
Oh, he's in the meth lab in
Okay.
the garage.
Oh man.
And so,
They
but-
knock the door down?
yes, they
Oh.
bust the door in.
I
And
don't think they knock.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, they knock it down.
they knock it down with the ram, and they dropped the ram when they came in, and it was like a brick entry, and it chipped the brick. And I just remember always seeing that chip and knowing that that's why that was there. So they all come in, and they've all got. I mean, they're SWAT
What's your
or
mom
whatever.
doing?
Everyone gets assigned an officer who's pointing a gun at them,
Even a child?
even
Wow.
the kids.
What?
Wow.
So I'm on the couch, and they run in,
Are
and they're
you
like,
crying?
"Not yet," and they're like, "Put your hands up, put your hands up." So I put my hands up, but I got a fucking
with a pickle.
pickle on my thumb, and there's an officer there, and he's pointing what looks like an M16 to me. I don't know what kind of gun it was. And then they secure the area. I remember they brought my dad in from the garage, and they had handcuffed him, but they pushed him to fall on the ground, but he couldn't catch himself because his hands were already cuffed. And I remember seeing my dad bash his face into the ground, and the cops, get their knee on his back and all that. And so I'm scared to move, right? There's this guy pointing a fucking gun at me.
And you're a baby.
I'm
6 years old.
right? And so, but then after they secured the area and they knew there was no danger, the cop put his gun down and he picked me up
Oh my goodness.
but that's when I cried.
When
Because
he
So
picked you
this
up.
memory is still this vivid.
yeah,
Wow.
I remember everything about it.
Did your mom get arrested?
Wow.
No, she got let out and they didn't pursue her in
Right.
the court case because their relationship was fucked up, obviously. So at that point, she was almost like, a victim just living in the environment.
That's what I was going to ask you, if your dad abused your mom.
There was some physical
Yeah.
issues that I remember from a kid. As an adult, you find out more
Sure.
details.
Yeah.
And there's two sides of the story.
Yep.
So, it wasn't just that my dad was, this maniacal asshole, and it wasn't just that my mom was a victim. Relationships are tough. So,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to play it like, one person was a bad guy and one person was a good guy, but there was some bad shit. Yeah.
One
Yeah.
person was the bad guy, one person was the meth dealer.
Right. Yeah.
I only ask that because I think mother probably in the right circumstance wouldn't want her children in a home where it could explode. I mean, she wouldn't want to endanger her kids.
Sure.
And if you're not being influenced by another person.
Sure.
Is your mom still alive?
Yes. And my dad is as well.
And
in prison? Or is he out of prison? Is he?
He's out. He got out. I think it's been about 7 years. Yeah,
but he
totally turned around
got
now.
out
Dude, that's awesome.
and then went back in, right?
Yeah. So
when did he get out the first time?
he was in for almost 5 years.
Was that a court? And we have so many obviously questions.
Yeah.
Was that from that first bust that you were just sharing with us?
Yeah. So the first bust, he was arrested. My grandparents had to come pick me up because both my parents had gotten arrested, but they lived just down the street. So they picked me and my little brother up. And I remember I was watching the news the next day and I saw my dad walk because they busted the whole ring, right? So they had them all arrested and they're being arraigned, I guess. So they were taking them to court.
How
And
big was the ring?
I don't really remember, but I remember seeing my dad on the news and just being like, "Oh wow, this is real. This is really happening."
But to
Yeah,
even
that's
process that as a small
At
child
6, yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
So then he, after that, I'm assuming that's when your mom and dad got divorced while he was in prison, or how?
Yeah, so they that was when I was in first grade, and so a couple years later, my mom, I was staying with my grandmother a lot, and I knew my mom was going out at night, and I remember being like jealous for my dad, like because I didn't know what was going on, but I knew something was going on, and then right after that, we moved in with this guy that I had known years before, but he had been married to my aunt. And he's the father of, one of my favorite cousins. And so I'm like, wait a minute, what the fuck is going on, right? And they had known each other from when they were kids, and they had both gotten divorced. And my mom and dad were technically not divorced at that point, but they ended up getting divorced a year and a half later, or a year later, something like that, while my dad was in prison. And then my mom remarried
How old
my
are you
stepdad.
now?
I was 10. So I was in third grade when we moved in with my stepdad, who's an amazing guy. He's always been great. Always there for me and my brother, and never any problems there. He was great. And then they got married at the end of my 5th grade year.
Are they
Right.
still married?
They are. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but he's quadriplegic now. So
What?
Why?
happened to him?
he had a stroke and lost his balance and fell down the stairs and had some nerve trauma. And
Wow.
How long ago was this?
8 months ago, a year
Oh.
ago.
Oh my gosh.
This just happened.
Yeah. And we're gonna get into it, but
Yeah.
it's gonna get way fucking weirder. So if you're
This
if you're
is-
excited now, stay tuned.
Don't turn it off.
Don't turn it off because it gets way fucking worse.
So you move in, they get married.
Mhm.
Your dad gets out of prison.
Yeah.
What's happening at
So
this point?
he moves in with his sister, that was formerly married to my stepdad, and she's
Jesus.
remarried now, right?
How is he handling
I
that
was
situation?
just about to ask that exact
I have
question.
zero knowledge of that.
Okay.
I don't know. So, he knew they were divorced when he got out. I'm sure people had told him. I've never
Yeah.
talked with him about it. I don't know.
Right.
But the relationship wasn't stellar before he went in. And so, I don't know.
Mhm.
So he gets out and he's in his early 30s. He's been in prison with nothing to do but exercise. We're kind of good looking people, right?
So your dad's like ripped up and like,
Yeah,
hot.
he's doing okay, right? So he hits the streets and he's after the ladies, right? And
He's after the ladies.
after the ladies, so he gets a job. He's working. He ends up in a little bit of a conflict with his sister because she was not a socialite, but involved in their community. So and her daughter was a very popular high school girl, cheerleader. And so when the community started to find out that there was a convicted felon living at the house, all of a sudden they don't want their daughter going over to see their friend anymore, something that you can identify with, I'm
Right.
sure. And so that caused some tension. And, eventually he got to a place where he needed to move out and get his own place. And I think by that point he had probably already started making money illegally again. I don't know when he
Mhm.
got back involved in the trade, but I don't think it was too long after he moved out of his sister's house. And so, at that point, on the other side, my dad started dating his stepbrother's ex-wife.
Ow.
good God.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of sister cousins and
This is good
He
for
needs
tonight.
more.
This is
I think
like
he
so
needs
good
more.
for tonight.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
yeah. So
I think he needs more.
yeah. Here, I'll hook
With
you
that
up.
being said,
With that being said, for sure. Good Lord.
Yeah. So they're dating and everything's fine at that point. I'm with my dad every other weekend, but he starts to
Now, how's the relationship with you and your dad at this point? Because it seems like everything's chaotic for him. Is it impacting you at all at this point? Thank you, sir.
So he's 10. You're 10, right?
when he
like
got
10,
out
12?
at 10, but he was out between out between 10 and like 15. So this
Okay.
is like 10, 11, 12.
Uh-huh.
How was he as a father? Was he tentative? Was he there?
Well, I saw him every other weekend. We always did things together. But it was about like going and blowing, right? We were going to nice restaurants. We were going to the fair. We'd go to Six Flags. We'd go, we were
this
always
is here local in Dallas.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, all local in Dallas, yeah. And so, everything was, pretty copacetic and normal.
Did your brother go with you guys all the
Mhm.
time? So you both are there every
Yeah.
other weekend. Okay.
Yeah. My little brother was always there. And my dad's new girlfriend, she had 2 kids and her younger son was the same age as my brother.
Mm.
And they were technically non-blood related cousins
Mhm.
anyway. So, it was just like it was a party
Normal.
for him.
Yeah.
Like, we would always go to ride go-karts at the, go-kart track and play mini golf and arcade games.
Mhm.
And we'd go to Deep Ellum and go to, I forget what is the arcade that was down there. It's closed down years ago.
so you had, besides the really bad stuff, the prison.
Pretty good childhood, it
yeah.
seems like.
So
your
now-
relationship with him though seems like a good one.
Yeah. It was the best it could be considering, that he wasn't in my life on a daily basis,
Mhm.
but yeah.
So then
Yeah.
what happened?
So, I was about 16 and I needed money for a trip for school. And I had been calling him and I wasn't able to get a hold of him. And I was old enough to drive, so I just drove over there and I had a key. So I went in and there's a fucking meth lab set up in the kitchen. Now,
Again.
at this point, he'd been telling me, well, I invested money in some businesses. I had some money that I stashed away. from before. And of course, my mom at this point, she's telling me, she's like, your dad's selling drugs again.
Oh, she knew.
And I'm like, how do you know? And she's like, look at all has this nice car. He has all these cars, a boat, jet skis. He's got this house. He doesn't work. Like, and I said, no, I talked to him about it. Like, he stashed some money away. And she said, well, if that is true, think about how fucking terrible that is. The way we suffered when he was in prison and we didn't have money to live. And I was like,
real quick, because just looking back, do you wish she wouldn't? Are you glad she was telling you this stuff? Do you wish she wouldn't have? Does it matter to you?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I mean, there was a difficult time when he got put in prison. It was, my dad invested in some trucking equipment. His mother ran a trucking company, and he invested in some trucking equipment so that there would be money to take care of us while he was in prison. And his mother sold all of the equipment and kept the money and told my mom to fuck off.
Oh my God.
And so my mother's parents were doing what they could to help. And I mean, this is no shit. I remember a big, like, 30-gallon trash bag filled with popcorn that my grandma popped for us so that we would have snacks. And I remember literally sitting down on the floor with this fucking big bag of popcorn in my lap and just sticking my head, like, there was so much of it. It's like, I didn't even mind wasting, I stick my whole head in there and eating it. But I mean, we were fucking poor, like we were eating popcorn for food. But it was fun as shit to me. I was just a kid, I mean, I was sad my dad wasn't there, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, we went through that. That was kind of part of my transition. But once we moved in with my stepdad, things got very normal. Either he or my mom cooked dinner every night. We ate dinner as a family. There was somebody to pick me up from school every week or every day. Life was pretty normal. When my dad got back out of prison, I had like the normal life at home. But then when I went to my dad's house, it was like party. Mm-hmm. Like we're going to all these fancy, nice restaurants and we're doing all of this shit. And my mom's telling me your dad's back in the, criminal world. I'm like, nah, he's just a good investor. And she's like, well, if that's true, it's kind of fucked up because he abandoned us while we were, on our own. And, you fast forward, I was about 16. I could drive. I go over to the house. I see the meth lab.
Did your heart sink?
Well, this is something that would be hard for someone who hasn't had this experience to know. Yep. But you can smell it. Right?
You can smell it outside?
Actually, it's so fucking strong. You could probably smell it outside. But when I walked in, I knew before I saw it.
Oh.
Wow.
I went looking for it like a bloodhound, right? Like
you did.
Yeah, because I smelled it. And then I got in the kitchen and there were these bowls that had this stuff. And I kept calling my dad and calling and finally he answered the phone and he's over at some girl's house. And I was like, Dad, what the fuck, bro? And he was like, you don't even know what that is. And I'm like, And I remember telling him, I said, when this smell took your dad away when you're a little kid, you remember what it is.
Wow.
And he said, no, this is a designer drug. And it's not even illegal. Like, this isn't even regulated yet. And I was like, and it wasn't too long after that, I took chemistry and we started talking about carboxyl groups and how it could be moved and, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, maybe it's plausible. Maybe that is true. Maybe it's something that's just slightly different that's not regulated yet. I don't know. But at that point, things started to get weird. People started coming around that I knew were not good people. There was this weird ass guy one time that was outside working on this Porsche. Like he doesn't live there, but the hood's open and he's fucking around with the wires and shit. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm here to see this guy. And turned out to be my dad. So I started talking to him and I realized that this guy is like a drug dealer that's like waiting to have a meeting with my dad. And I get in the car with him to go ride around in this cool ass Porsche and he's listening to rap music and he gets out I must have been a Desert Eagle or something. It was a big fucking gun. And he's like dancing with it while he's driving.
What?
And I remember there was this minivan filled with like this, pudgy middle-aged fat guy and his wife. And he looks over and sees the gun and the guy looks him right in the eyes while he's dancing with the gun. And I was like, holy
Totally
shit.
normal day.
Yeah.
Well, right. But at that point, I'd kind of started getting used to meeting all these weird fucking people. And then,
Right.
then I go and I'm talking to my dad. And at this point, my dad knew that I kind of knew. So he would talk with me a little bit and he'd be like, did you meet so-and-so? And I was like, yeah. And he said, what'd you think? And I remember telling him, I said, I think that if you do business with that guy, he's going to make sure that you end up in prison. He's too
You just
stupid
had a
to do
feeling.
it.
You said it.
Yeah. And so, that things were kind of weird. And then one day, one of my dad's friends called me and he said, where are you at? And I told him, and he said, you need to get over here right now. And I said, what happened? He said, your dad got busted.
Mm.
And I mean, I remember I was dating this girl at the time and I was like, get in the car. And I don't even know why I was driving fast. Like getting there quick wasn't going to make a difference. Like he was gone, but I drove like a fucking maniac to get over to the house. And they told me the whole story about how they raided the house. And
how old are you at the second?
I was like 17 when they picked him up. I skipped a part. His apartment got raided. So my godfather, saw how much money he was making and came to him and said like, hey, will you, hook me up? Like, I know you're making all this money. And my dad said, well, I won't give it to you. You got to earn it. And he said, I need somebody to ship and receive packages because they can't all come to my house. So he agreed to, be the package delivery person.
God.
But that's how he got busted. I mean, they were shipping, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of meth in fucking FedEx. Right.
God.
And so he ended up getting busted.
God, that's insane.
Right. And I mean, drug dealers still use like delivery services from what I understand. But so when he got busted, they scared the shit out of him
Of
and told him
course.
like, you'll never see your kids again, blah, blah, blah. So they got him to flip. And the package that he had received, he needed to take it to my dad. So they had him wear a wire.
Mm.
And so my godfather wore a wire and brought the
Wow.
package to my dad's house and they recorded the whole conversation.
Ugh.
And as soon as he walked out, they started to raid the house. Well, at that point, my dad was paranoid and all that shit. So he runs and dives through the window.
Mm.
And there's cops out there and they beat the fuck out of him. I
Oh
mean,
my
I remember
God.
seeing him because he got out on bail for a little bit. And I remember seeing him and he had a bruise where they hit him with a nightstick on the outside of his arm. And the bruise went through to the inside of his arm. They hit him so hard. It didn't break his arm, but they fucked him up pretty good. And he was cut up from jumping through the glass because it was,
my
it was plate glass.
Naturally.
It's like
Yeah.
This is like
A
a
movie.
real movie.
Seriously.
My gosh.
This is
And-
awesome.
And I remember talking with my godfather and him. The way he was talking about it was weird. He said, "Don't worry about your dad," and I'm like, "No, he's a second.
Godfather who just turned on him.
He's like a second time. Well, at this point, we didn't know he was the rat.
Yeah.
And he was like, I was like, no, he's already been in prison for this. They're going to throw the book at him.
Mhm.
Like there's no coming back from this. And he goes, no. If he talks, they'll let him go. And like, I don't really know when my dad instilled this in me, but I was like, talk. My dad's not gonna, what the fuck are you talking? My dad's not going to talk. Like, are you crazy? And there was just something about his tone of voice. And he was like, if you need anything, let me know. And there was like guilt or
Mhm.
something.
Uh-huh.
And so when I found out that he was the one that ratted, I was like, oh, this totally fucking.
It
How
all
did you
makes
find out?
sense.
How'd you find out?
My dad found out in the, once the court proceedings started,
Mhm.
there's stories about the testimony that they have from the witnesses. And even if they redact the name, if they're like, well, this witness came to the house wearing a wire and he delivered a package. My dad's like, well, fucking, that's my friend,
Right.
And so all of that stuff happened. Weird twist of fate. Years later, while my dad was still in prison, I accidentally went to work for the company that my godfather worked at when all the shit went down. And he had left and he wasn't there anymore. But I was, at that point, I had graduated. I had an accounting finance degree. I was the controller for this company. So I was over the accounting department and payroll and all this shit. And I found out that my godfather, who put my dad in prison for a natural life sentence, was coming back to work, and I was going to have to cut him paycheck. And I quit. I quit that week.
Oh,
I was like, I'm not cutting that motherfucker a paycheck. I'm not doing it.
oh no,
So
That's nuts.
How much time did your dad get?
The second time?
Well, there's a lot of misconceptions about prison time. So state time is different than federal time. Federal time has up to 17 good years per day or good days per year. I believe it's something like that.
What does that mean?
Where if you behave properly in prison, that they'll reduce your sentence by 17 days per year.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
So, and then there's courses that you can take. So depending on what your charge was. So if you had a drug charge, there's a drug course that you can take where you can get a year off and, things like that. Right. But it's not like state time where you get sentenced for 10 years and you serve 2.5 years and you get out. It doesn't work like that. The truth in sentencing laws that got passed federally, they changed all of that. And so when my dad got a natural life sentence,
God,
I mean, it's forever, and so he was in the worst federal prisons because when you are never getting out, they don't put you in the one you can break out of. You got nothing to lose. And so my dad was in Leavenworth. My dad
holy
was in
shit. Wow.
my dad was in Latuna, Beaumont. And Beaumont's a newer prison, but people that know the prison system know Beaumont's the only federal penitentiary that the high has a guard shack that's armed in the center of the yard because it's too dangerous for there to be firearms inside the fence in most prisons. But at this prison, all of the worst people are there. And so it's less dangerous, the risk of them getting the guns, than the guards not having access to them inside the prison.
Crazy.
So my dad was in the high.
He was in Beaumont?
In Beaumont, and he was in, I mean, everybody knows Leavenworth. Leavenworth is where they sent all of the prisoners.
That's the one I know. Yeah.
When they closed Alcatraz, everybody from Alcatraz went to Leavenworth, right? That was
Where is that?
Kansas.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
Yeah.
That either.
That's
So
crazy.
that's where
Well, I
your
watch
dad
a
was.
lot of Lockup, but I don't know which one.
Yeah.
Lockup
I
or
love Lockup.
Me
but
too.
So do
Gonna have
I,
Lockup
oddly.
here,
I used to watch it while my dad was in prison. I was like, my dad was there.
God.
And it was like this weird cathartic thing. I
Yeah.
don't know. It was weird.
So how often would you go visit him?
Almost never.
Really?
So the first time that he was in prison, I only saw him. The first time I only saw him once when he was in federal, and that was at Latuna, which is in El Paso.
And the first time he did how many years?
Like just under 5, like
Okay.
4.5.
Yep.
That was before the truth in sentencing laws.
Okay.
I think he got 10 years and he got out in 4.5, something
Yep.
like that. And then the second time he got a natural life sentence, but he pled guilty because his girlfriend at the time got wrapped up in it. And there was no way for her to avoid prison time, but the prosecutor offered her a drastically reduced sentence if he would plead guilty. But they promised him that later they would redo his plea bargain, and they didn't. So he pled guilty to a natural life sentence, and they're like, fuck off. And so
Wow.
Wow.
years later, we were communicating, and he said, I want you to, they record all of that. So when you're negotiating your plea, all that's recorded by a court stenographer. So I want you to reach out to the court, and I want you to get copies of the, stenographer's notes. And so when I reached out to the court and asked for it, they never sent it to me. And 2 weeks later, my dad got a notice in prison that his sentence had been reduced to 20
What?
years.
Wow. 20
Wow.
years.
Yeah. So it went from natural life to
That's
20.
yeah. That's crazy.
And so he
Wow.
got out in like 17 and 3/4 years, something like that. So my dad was in prison for almost half of his life.
Wow.
So, all right. So, wow, first. That's
Wow.
unbelievable. This
And we've also only barely scratched the surface.
Mhm.
That's crazy.
We do not have enough time for that
So-
other stuff.
We hear stories about prison and whatnot.
I think you need to come back. We have to do a part 2.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
I
you're
think
going to
so.
have to do a
Man,
part
this is
2.
Unbelievable.
People are going to be like, wait, what else?
I don't
feel
know.
like.
We
Well,
want to hear it.
I'm just curious about
We
some
haven't
of
even
this-
got to the weird shit yet.
We want the
that's
weird
what I'm
stuff,
curious
too.
about, like in prison, because I'm sure you and your dad have had conversations. I'm guessing, right?
Mhm.
I mean, is the stories you hear about prison, they confirmed by him?
In terms of like the rape and stuff
Yeah.
like that, I asked him about that, and he said that basically, now there are, famous cases, and I don't know why, but it's mostly in state prisons where there's, I don't know if you watch Boondocks. You ever watch Boondocks?
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, if you're not black, you probably shouldn't watch it without a black person in the room because there's so much race-related content. You should be fucking uncomfortable watching it.
It's an old school comic strip.
No, Boondocks is a animated series.
Yeah, it started off as a comic strip
Oh,
in the
did
newspaper.
it? I didn't know that, but all of the stories are true. And there's this.
Yeah.
There's a episode where there's a guy that rapes people that in prison, right? Well, I looked it up. It's true. There's a guy that does that, but that type of shit usually happens in state prison.
Wow.
In the federal prisons, basically what my dad said was like, if you want to fuck other dudes, there's enough guys there that are willing to do it voluntarily for each other that you like. There's not like a bunch of like rape.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
And he said, so, once you get kind of marked is that, then you're excluded from the regular prison population. And those dudes are just kind of off on their own.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Wow,
Now, the one thing he did tell me about federal prison that's pretty interesting is they have their own language, right? So child molesters are called chomos. And he said if word gets out, because
Heard that.
they don't share your record with everybody
Sure.
when they let you in, you've got to share it. But if it's found out that you're a chomo, then you'll have to live in solitary because they'll kill you.
I've
No
heard
kidding. Yeah, I've definitely heard the same thing.
And I asked my
That's
dad, I was
real.
like, why? And he goes, all these guys have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Just the thought that their kids are out there and, somebody like this being out on the street could attack their kids and there's nothing they can do about it.
True.
They won't put up with that,
Man, that's crazy.
And so, but there are people that are in there that will reach out to their family members that are on the outside that have access to the internet and have them do the research to see what news articles there are about this person. And if it comes out that,
Wow.
you're a chomo, then you gotta go into hiding basically. And
Heard
solitary in prison is fucking miserable.
I've heard stories about that for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Is there lots of murders and stuff like that?
Not in federal.
No.
Murder's a state crime. So mostly it's white collar crime.
See, because I clearly have never been to prison, thank God.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Thank God.
the opposite way around. I thought
No.
federal would be way worse.
No. It's mostly white collar crime, and then anything that crosses state lines. So if you're a big enough drug dealer, and you've crossed state lines, then that's federal. And the prosecutors want to take drug crimes federal because of the truth in sentencing laws. They know you're going to serve your term. If they can't prove that you crossed state lines and violated federal law, you only violated state law. If you get put in state prison, you're not going to serve very much of your time.
But wouldn't state be way worse than federal as far as, even if it's 2 years as opposed to 5 years? Sounds like it'd be way fucking worse to be in state.
Maybe, but the other thing is that when you're violating federal law, you're violating state law,
Ooh.
you're violating county law, and you're violating city law too. And so when my dad was at the end of his first sentence, when he got done with his federal sentence, he had to go to Huntsville to serve state time,
No shit.
and he had to go to Dallas County to serve city time.
God, really?
Yeah. And you get like dual credit. So it's not like he had to serve the whole sentence, but he was at each. So when you ask me how many times I visited him once when he's in federal at
Yeah.
Tuna. I visited him once when he was in state at Huntsville.
Yeah.
And I visited him several times when he was in county because his uncle, my great uncle and aunt would take me up there. And it's a very different experience as a kid at each place. In Latuna, you're in the same room with them. You can hug them. You can eat food together. In state, you're separated by a screen. There's a hole in the glass, and you can reach your hand through, and you can touch their hands, right? But you can't hug them. And in county, you're talking through what's effectively a payphone and looking through a window. And I wasn't tall enough to see through the window. In fact, the payphone, the cord was only long enough that I had to be on like my tippy toes and stretch my head up just to hear and be able to talk at the same time. So I couldn't really see him, and they'd lift me up to look in there. But you're seeing all the other prisoners because they don't go to like a visitor center when you're there. you're looking into the prison cell with all the other inmates that are standing there shirtless and all this stuff. It's just a weird.
That's crazy.
Weird.
That is insane.
How scary was that as in your age? Was there any one that scared you?
No.
I feel scared right now.
I know. It's like, I have like anxiety.
Oh
No.
man.
Fucking up someone's visit will get you killed.
So what is that? What it mean?
Like if you did something that scared someone's child in the visitor center, when you get back in general population, you're fucked.
I didn't even think about that.
I didn't either.
You don't mess with someone's visit.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, everyone is super respectful, and when you're in the visitor center, the prison will pull you out. You'll lose your visiting privileges and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, everyone was totally copacetic. I never felt weird about it. I had children before my dad got out of prison, and so I took my kids to the prison to visit, and I took my wife with me too, although there was some conflict between the two of them. But I took my kids to visit, and I didn't feel uncomfortable about it at all.
Did you ever do any drugs or do all that stuff? Because I just wonder if it made you want to or made you the complete opposite.
Or did it
Opposite.
even matter?
I never. I run a whiskey podcast now. I drink every day, and I didn't drink until I was 28 years old.
Wow.
Wow.
You were
it
against
just
all of it.
turned me totally against it. I didn't see any benefit to drinking.
Drugs.
I've still never smoked a cigarette, like nothing ever, nothing, just because I was so afraid of it.
Tell
Yeah.
us about your brother. How, like, his path with all that, like,
Yeah, so my brother was younger, so
Right.
he didn't have.
How old are you now?
I'm
You're 43?
41, almost 42.
Okay. I don't worry at 43.
Yeah. And so my brother being one when my dad went in the first time, and then he would have been somewhere around 6 when he got out.
mhm.
And so my brother didn't really start forming memories of my dad until he was out after the first stint. And then, when he went back in, my brother was still pretty young, because I was in my brother was probably 5th
Yeah.
grade ish
Mhm.
when my dad went back in.
So he got around your brother was around 8 the
Mhm.
first time. When did your dad go back in the second time?
Um,
How old was your brother? So how far from the time he got out?
He
did
went,
go back in?
so he went in, he went back in when my brother was probably 10,
God.
something like that. Yeah. And so they didn't have the same relationship that I had, just because, they just didn't
age.
have as
Yeah.
much interaction together at the formidable years. And so my brother, he ended up, I decided I wanted to go to college. I wanted to get degrees.
Where'd you go?
At Texas A&M.
All right.
So I'm the guy that, like, no one in my family had really blazed a path for me. My family's not a family that a lot of people go to college and start their own businesses. So for me, I just would look at people that had the life that I wanted, and I'd go, hey, what'd you do?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then when I found out everyone that had what I wanted went to college and had like a professional career, I said, well, that's the shit I want. And so I decided I was going to go to college.
Awesome, though, that you took that path.
My brother
Sure.
didn't.
Yeah.
My brother was the guy that he was always looking for the get rich quick scheme. He was very gregarious and friendly and could build rapport real quick. So businesses that wanted salespeople would sell him a bill of goods and say like, hey, we're gonna get you, in this position. You're gonna work your way up. There's a guy and he drives a Bentley and
It's big in MLM.
yeah, he got pulled into some MLMs. He sold weight loss for some of the weight loss places, that type of thing. And then one day, post 9/11, he called me and he said, I'm going to join the military. And, there was a part of me that was like, this might be the best thing for him because he didn't have a lot of discipline. He was, he was wild, he was feral, but
Fair.
but at the same time, I was worried for his safety because virtually everyone that joined the military at this time frame was going to see active combat, and it's not like he was, signing up to be a general. You know what I mean? Like I think he had a GED, right? So
you said this is post 9/11?
it's post 9/11, yeah. And so he ended up signing up for airborne infantry.
Oh shit.
And he went to the Army and went to basic training and all that stuff. And through a weird twist of fate, his division never got deployed. They ended up at Fort Polk. They had set up a city with actual Iraqi citizens, and that was the training ground for everybody before they got shipped overseas. And so they would bring all of these military personnel in there, and they would run drills in what was effectively an Iraqi city, right?
Oh.
I mean, they had like bread shops and all of that shit, just like you would find in Iraq. And my brother's
here in the U.S.
in Fort Polk, Louisiana, yeah.
No kidding.
And my brother's job was to play the part of a terrorist. And so they wear these units so that when you get hit with the lasers, you can tell that you've been shot or that you got hit by a, bomb or whatever. And he was to play the part of the terrorist, and the trainee's job was to learn how to find the terrorists, detect them, talk with the citizens and get them to share information about the whereabouts of the terrorists and all that stuff. So even though my brother never saw active combat, he experienced being hunted. He would have to live in the woods and eat bugs for days because there were, helicopters that had infrared and sniffing dogs looking for him, right? And so
that's crazy.
So somehow, even though he never saw active combat, and he lied about it, he said that he was special forces and he went on these special training missions and whatnot. But I used to do his taxes, and when I had him sign his documents one year, I had him sign a release form that let me get access to his actual records for his military service. And
did he know that?
No, he never knew. He never knew. But I found out because it tells you how many days you spent in active combat and how many days you spent out of the country. And I knew he had never been deployed, but he still ended up with PTSD. I mean, he got shot at, he got hunted by dogs, he got chased by Apache helicopters, all that. But he ended up with PTSD, and he ended up with some injuries too while he was in training. You got to jump out of a plane and land without pulling the brakes and shit, and it fucked up his back. He passed out one time while he was running with his full rucksack on, and he just ended up with some injuries. And those military doctors, man, they love giving out those narcotics. And so by the time he got out of the military, he was fully addicted to painkillers.
Wow.
And so, he gets out. He got married. He thought he's going to get deployed, and he was dating this girl, and he got married, and I performed the ceremony. I was a junior high youth pastor. That's part of the shit we're not even going to talk about.
Where at?
In the Colony, Calvary Christian Center.
Wow, that's crazy.
But anyway, so I got ordained.
That's a whole nother show right here.
I was
Holy
going
shit.
to.
He has to
buddy.
come back.
I hope people will come back. Will you come back?
I will. Yeah. So
We need a part 2.
I got
Yeah,
ordained,
we
and I
do.
performed the ceremony like shotgun wedding. We had 1 week to plan it. I gotta tell you, we fucking killed it. It was an awesome wedding. And so he got married. So when he got out, he's trying to get on his feet, trying to find a job, kind of skipping around, looking for that get rich quick scheme. And he just kind of, bumbled around. He'd find a place, think it was great, and then it wouldn't pan out. And his alcoholism and drug addiction got worse and worse, and he took his life in 2014.
That was not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
All to hear. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So I'm a big advocate of people getting help, mental health. And
Did you have any idea he was depressed like that?
that's the bad part.
You did.
No.
He'll
No.
tell you, but you don't believe them. So,
How
You know-
old was he?
he would have been, I was 37. He was 31, I think. Something like that. Yeah. So, it's very hard to tell the difference between the person who says, I'm going to kill myself because they want you to get excited and pay attention to them, and the person that's actually going to do it. You know what I mean?
I totally know. I have a grandfather who committed suicide, and that was the same kind of thing.
And
It's
so
very
he,
difficult.
he would call me and he'd say, I don't have any money, and I need to borrow $400. And I'd go, no, I'm not doing that. And he'd go, you don't know how bad my life is. Like sometimes I just want to put a gun in my mouth and just put it and just get it over with. And I took that as manipulation, right? That he was trying to get me to do what it was that he wanted to do, because he was a salesperson, so he knew how to sell it, and I didn't believe him. But he wasn't bullshitting.
Is that how he did it?
Actually, he had done research on how to shoot and kill himself and not make a big mess.
What?
And so he did shoot himself. It was an offhanded shooting, which is it's makes it harder for the family. But he shot himself with his left hand. Which
Why is that?
A right-handed person would typically shoot themselves with the right hand. So if a person commits suicide with their left hand, it makes you think that there was foul play, right? I mean, my brother didn't have any enemies that would want to shoot him, but
Do you have children?
no, thank God,
Did he leave a letter?
no. And if you
Was
ever,
he married?
he was at the time.
He
Yeah, I did the ceremony.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They
You
did
said
split
that,
up. They did split up, but they had gotten back together and they were living together at the time. So he had started a job with a company in my industry. Actually, I fucking hate this guy. And he sold my brother a bill of goods, and he had been talking to an investor, and I know the investor, and he drives a Bentley, and he's kind of flashy, and everybody knows who he is.
Who is the guy? We can block his name out.
Nah, I ain't doing that.
Maybe after.
And they had been talking with this investor. Well, what this owner of this company was doing was he was telling the would-be employees that the investor had invested and that he got his money from the business, which was a complete fabrication, right? And so with that evidence, they were able to convince people to come work for them straight commission, because they're like, look at what this guy was able to do. Do you want to drive a Bentley? Do you want to live in this nice house? If you want that, you've got to come work this plan. And my brother worked and worked and worked. And I mean, I remember at this point, I had a really successful real estate business. And my brother called me and he said, you need to shut it all down, bro. Like, I found the thing. You need to come work with me. Like, I'm about to make so much money. You're not even, you won't even know what to do. And I was like, yeah, I've spent a long time building this up. I'm not just going to walk away from it.
Yeah.
And he worked there, I think it was about 6 months, and he was about to get his first commission. And the guy told him, like, oh, sorry, that was a house account. We already had that lead in the system. And it was like $600. And my brother worked there for at least 3 months. It was
With
3
no
to 6
money?
months
With
with
no
no
income?
money. And the guy wouldn't even give him the $600. And then my brother got into a fight with his wife that night, and he left her with her friends, went home, said hi to the neighbor, walked inside, and killed himself.
Oh, from that.
Yeah, and then at the funeral, the motherfucker that refused to give him his money showed up in a suit, wore his sunglasses the whole time, and we had like an open mic for you to get up and speak, and he got up and said all of this fucking nonsensical stuff that didn't make any sense, just trying to soothe his own soul. And I'm just sitting there twitching, and my boys are holding me like, don't do this at the funeral, but I've made peace with it. At the end of the day, everybody's responsible for their own decisions. There's going to be a lot of evil people out there that try to take advantage of you, no matter what your situation is, and you don't get to put your decisions on them, right? So that was the choice my brother made. It's a weird thing because, my brother shot himself in the head. He didn't take some pills. He didn't put some scratches on his arm. He fucking shot himself. And so there's a little part of me that, because people will come up to me when they know my story, and my wife, we don't do a lot with it, but my wife started an organization called Live Stay, to try to raise money for suicide awareness and things like that. And we're not doing anything with it, but Regardless, I mean, we've done some stuff, and people come up and they'll tell me like, their story, or somebody will say like, I used to struggle with depression, and I cut my wrist and blah blah blah, and I'm always gracious towards them, but I'm like, look, you did something that had a high probability of attention and a low risk of death. My brother fucking shot himself. Like, he wasn't bullshitting, right? And there's just a part of me, and maybe this is just my coping mechanism, but I just look at it and I go, he got what he wanted. You know what I mean? Like, not that it's right. He was wrong. He had a lot more life to live. But somehow I just try to comfort myself in this situation and realize, like, he wasn't fucking around. This is what he wanted.
But in his mind, that is.
Right. And I have to respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think to actually do that, I mean, mentally, there is something not right. I mean, inside of them, because to actually do that, you are suffering tremendously, I feel.
Yeah.
We think we all go, everybody has the ability to go through moments where it feels very real.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. Clearly, right? Because at the end of the day, he was saying something to you, and as you were saying, you did take it really seriously, but it was very real for him. I know we've all gone through moments where it feels so real, and it's one of those things where if we could take a moment to step back and just give it a second to rest, because the highs are never as high as, I've learned this in my life. Highs are never ever as high as we think they are. Our lows are never as low as we think they are. It feels like life is constantly doing this. No matter how fucking great shit could be, you in the $1 billion lottery, be like this, and then something immediately could take you down to this. And it's one of those unfortunate events. Clearly, there's no question about it. You've gotten something out of it, and compassion wise, maybe, and
sure.
Ability to empathize with people. And it's unfortunate. I'm sorry you had experienced that, man.
He sounds like he was in a lot of pain internally from a lot of different things.
Sure.
I'm sure it was from his dad, from experiencing all those things. I mean,
lot.
It's a lot.
I never understood it, but in retrospect, I recognize it. Yeah. So for me, I can remember, my dad got put in prison right when he got sentenced and sent away, right? And I was going into college. I had no idea how I was going to pay for school. My mom and my stepdad were not wealthy people. And I remember feeling like, bring it. Like, whatever, bring your worst. I mean, I can remember I don't even know what the fuck I was yelling at. I was just yelling out into the universe, like, is that all you got? You think this is going to stop me? You think this is enough to stop me? Double it, triple it. I don't care. I don't quit. And I never did. That's just who I am. There's this quote from Bruce Lee. He says, be flowing water. And I thought about that. And it's like, you can dam me up if you want. I'm just going to make a lake. And then I'm going to overflow the banks of the lake, and I'm going to make a new river, and I'm going to go somewhere new. And someone can dam me up there if they want. I'll make another lake. I just don't quit. When God was making me, he forgot to put the scoop of quit in.
Good. That's good. It's
good.
Really good.
I don't have any quit in me. And so, it doesn't matter how bad it gets. It doesn't matter. Like, life's hard. My life's been hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter how bad it is. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to win in the end, or I'm going to die and not give a shit. That's my philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to get in my way, you're going to lose eventually, or I'm going to die and not give a shit. So waste your time if you want.
Well,
right?
That's good to be teaching your kids.
Yes.
Well, and my kids, I have 2 kids.
What are their ages?
15 and 12. And I don't know if I'm a good parent or I won the kid lottery twice. But my kids are perfect.
That is
No drama, smart.
That's good.
They're great. If I could give one bit of advice to parents out there, I mean, my kids, they don't argue, they help, they get along, And
How'd you pull that off? Because that's
It's-
just not the norm.
we say that my wife and I say the same thing to anybody that asks. Because when people meet our kids, they're shocked. Like if my kids were here, I could tell them to sit on that couch, and they would sit on that couch and not make a word or not make a peep, and you wouldn't know they were there until I was done. Like they're respectful. It's not that they lack confidence. Like my son roasts me so bad I'll cry. Like he's but I've built up his confidence. But they're respectful. They understand their social environment, what's appropriate, not. And the one thing we tell everybody is do not negotiate with the terrorist. Because kids, when they're little, children are the most selfish creatures that have ever been created because they can communicate. It's not like a dog that wants you to give them something. Like kids can use words and hurt you, right?
Sure.
And when my kids were little, there was never even one single time where they asked about something and we gave them the answer and then we changed our minds. Never. Like even if they convinced us that we were wrong afterward, we would still stick to our original decision because the principle of them not arguing their way out of our logic was more important than who was right or who was wrong. And so now when we tell our kids to do something, there's no argument. They don't say like, well, I did the dishes yesterday. If I say do the dishes, they just do the dishes because they know it doesn't matter what they say. They're doing the dishes, right?
I love that.
And so that's
No kidding, for sure.
that's the one, I've messed a lot of
Advice.
things up, but my kids, I feel pretty confident that we've done a good job with the kids. And sometimes people go, how old's your daughter? I'm like, she's 15. They're like, get ready. And I'm like, I'm as ready as I'm going to get. Shit.
They're not always. I mean, I think I might have said it to you when you're at the house, but I work with a lot of kids and a lot of teenagers, and they're not all crazy. I mean, I've seen a lot of girls too, and
Good
they don't
ones.
ever.
You're not all Marcella.
They're not all me. Exactly. That's actually true.
Poor Patrick.
I thought that actually.
Poor me.
Poor mom.
I thought more poor Patrick. I mean, Patrick's so cool.
It's
I
really
love
poor
Patrick
mom.
so much. No,
Patrick just had to deal with it after.
No, it's not poor mom. Here's
It
why
is
it says
poor mom.
No, because Patrick is the man.
Patrick signed up for this shit.
That's right. That's
didn't-
exactly
That
right.
is true. He does it willingly.
Oh my God! Because I mean, good Lord.
I'm
poor
just a lot
Patrick.
of fun. So, he
What
misses
was
me
that?
when I'm not around.
I
he
don't know if
does.
I agree with that one, but I know it's
He
kidding.
actually really does.
No, I
He
know.
He
feelings
misses me when
hurt.
I'm not there. I am trouble, but you miss it.
Oh yeah.
But I agree. Like he's such a. I love Patrick. I just
Thank
have to.
you.
I'm
He's
serious because
awesome.
he's just such a great guy, and it is unbelievable. He's so committed. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. Like he's
It is.
such a committed guy, and I'm Team Patrick for sure.
Yeah. I'm Team Patrick.
Yeah.
Randy, can you give us your social media for if people want to find your podcast?
Yes. So my podcast is Bourbon Real Talk.com. So you can go there. It's on every social or on all podcast players. So podcast app, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever it's on all of them. So you can just search Bourbon Real Talk. You can search Bourbon Real Talk on YouTube, and my pages on Instagram and Facebook are / Bourbon Real Talk.
And if someone wants to sell a house or buy a house, contact you.
You contact me.
So what's your brokerage?
I'm with Keller Williams.
Okay.
So I'm an agent with Keller Williams. I've been with them. There was a year that I was off that I moved down to Austin to run a real estate training company, but not run. I don't want to overstate it, but I was an executive for a real estate training company. But other than that, I've been with Keller Williams Frisco Stars since 2008. I've sold a little over 500 houses. So
Nice.
Wow.
I know what I'm doing.
Just
I
a little
think
bit.
you know a little
Just a
bit.
little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I'm as passionate about real estate as I am bourbon. So.
How's the real estate market right now? Because it seems like it's slowing down, although it's dramatically. There's so much going on in Frisco and North Dallas.
Yeah, so there was kind of a downturn in 2017. June, July is when it it went down, but with interest rates kind of coming back down recently, I've seen a little bit of a pickup. So I tell everybody, if you're thinking about buying a house sometime in the next few years, you're going to want to do that sooner rather than later, because you don't care as much about what you pay for the house as you do the interest rate.
Yeah.
And interest rates are going to go up eventually.
Yeah.
And if you have a house to sell, you're going to want to take advantage of that sooner rather than later, because as interest rates go up and property values go down, a $10,000 reduction in value for a buyer might affect their payment $50 or $70 a month. Yeah. But for a seller, it affects you $10,000, right?
Isn't that crazy?
So let's not wait. If you know that there's a move to be made, you need to make it sooner rather than later. Yeah.
We still need a number 2. We need a second session
show
for sure,
with you. Would you please come back so we can do a part 2?
I will come back, but I'm we didn't even we're at 10% of the weird shit.
That's my point. We need a 2-hour session with you.
And we expect different bourbon and whiskey. Just keep enlightening us.
That's when you subscribe to my podcast, you'll see there's different whiskey every time.
I liked the one you had last time.
Yeah, I'll get you some more.
I like the one you had today.
Yeah.
I want to try that apple.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I've got to try the apple because I'll get hammered on the one here.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will definitely have a part 2 and 3.
Thank you.
Randy.